Another fire accents the Moscow skyline tonight. A massive conflagration at a warehouse. Once again, everything burns, and Moscow is no exception. Just hours before this fire that you're seeing on the screen right now, there was a massive fire at an airport within Moscow. And just hours before that, just yesterday, there was a massive explosion at that military facility, a strategic one at that amounted to a mushroom cloud that I believe was foreshadowing. All the while, the Russians have been repelling Ukrainian drones. We have enlistment offices being burned. We have other explosions and fires like this around the country happening on a daily basis, all of which, as a solitary incident, would have made mainstream news just 6 months ago. But now we've been desensitized to this level of violence near the Kremlin. And that, my friends, is dangerous. It's dangerous because the closer this war comes to the Kremlin, the closer it gets to us in the form of a mushroom cloud of the nuclear sort. Now, contemporaneous with all of this chaos in the world, the signs are everywhere, okay? There have been people within this community, this discourse, Russia-Ukraine discourse, who have been saying that support for Ukraine is waning. I have always railed against that view. I've always been of the belief that the United States, for them, this is an existential war for economic reasons only. Because when the American bubble bursts, it's going to get real ugly back home. And they need to kick that can down the road. The reason why it's almost been entirely disproven, those people who've been saying that, yeah, they're getting rid of Zelensky now and blah, 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 and Zelensky's going to be the next Saddam or Gaddafi or the Mujahideen, I've always denied that. I've always said that, no, they're going to stick this one out to the end because they have to. And now Biden today proposed 24 billion reasons as to why. In addition to that, for people who have said that NATO doesn't have the capacity to ramp up their military industrial complex to meet the demands of this conflict, the United States churned out 20,000 artillery rounds this month for Ukraine, and they're now claiming that they can do 80,000 next month. And it's very likely that production capacity will continue to increase to the point when the Ukrainian artillery capability is at parity with the Russians. Now, if and when that happens, that's going to mean that once again, the Kremlin is going to be overstretched. And when the Kremlin gets overstretched and when this becomes a strategic conflict, because we now know that Zelensky is going to be taking the war to Putin in the Black Sea, he's explicitly stated that now all bets are off, that it's basically a green light on commercial vessels within the Black Sea. And now today we have a reconnaissance vessel, an American one, in the Black Sea once again, which is always a bad sign because that usually precipitates some major incident. And it's been circling there for the last 24 hours. It's a sign that something big is going to happen in the Black Sea soon, which is going to, of course, invite a series of reprisals by the Russians. It's going to get ugly, 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 ugly. Poland is now committing to moving 10,000 troops. 10,000 troops towards the Belarusian border. Now, we were talking last week how they committed 1,000 troops. Then a couple days later, they said we're going to commit 2,000 troops. A couple days later, now they're saying 10,000 troops. Do you notice a trend here? Is it at all coincidental that just a month and a half after the Wagner coup, things get crazy in Africa? Is it at all coincidental that just a month and a half after the Wagner leaving Ukraine, shit's getting real near the Suwalki corridor that links Kaliningrad, the Russian exclave, with Belarus in that direction, and that Poland is mobilizing day after day after day? It's not a coincidence. Not a coincidence at all. Concurrent with all of this, we have North Korea, who has sacked their lead general after only 7 months. Now, this is incredibly suspicious because throughout that 7 months, things have escalated a lot. We're talking about nuclear submarines. We're talking about some of the biggest military drills ever conducted and about to be conducted. The leaders of South Korea, Japan, and the United States are going to be meeting at a military base in the coming weeks ahead, as well as conducting one of the largest ever civil defense drills that's going to see the entire population of South Korea descend into their bunkers in a nuclear drill. We have fires raging across continents, from Siberia to the boreal forests of Canada to Maui, that nobody could have foreseen. Gale force winds and the right set of dry conditions. All you need is a spark, I guess, to fan those flames. Africa descends into war. ECOWAS, the Economic Alliance of West African nations, is going to send a coalition of 5,000 troops into Niger to attempt to reinstate the government there. And did I mention that the Doomsday planes were in the air? I think I did. They've been doing their rounds. Not good. Not good. Things are getting realer and realer by the day. You're probably wondering why I'm holding a tomahawk. Well, something about holding a tool that can also be used as a weapon. It's great for a talk like this because it reminds me of how unassured this veneer of civility that we've come to indulge in is, how frail and fragile it all is, and how when things come down to the wire, it's going to be you and your tools versus the world. You will be your first responder. You will be your first line of defense. And a tomahawk is great because not only is it a formidable weapon, but it's also a tool that you can use to do woodcraft, procure firewood, and all the rest. And it's just a really kick-ass zombie apocalypse weapon. I mean, look at that spike on there. Wow. Let's hope it doesn't come down to that. But unfortunately, I do believe that the Russians are going to have no choice now but to ultimately detonate a nuclear weapon in order to deter NATO, to hope that NATO puts the brakes on this. And that is going to create worldwide panic when that happens. I do believe. That's my prediction. Because it's clear in Biden's commitment to this conflict with $24 billion. I mean, I can't count the amount of channels of the pro-Russian crowd, of which I'm not adjacent in any way, I would say, in terms of our opinions overlapping. There's a bit of overlap there, but we don't agree on everything, and we certainly don't agree on the extent to which Ukraine is out of this fight just because the Russians are making advancements in Kharkov right now. None of them would have seen a $24 billion package coming. All of them were saying that the support for Zelensky is up, that he's the next Saddam, he's the next Gaddafi or Mujahideen, and quite the opposite, actually. This is nothing like those cases. Zelensky is a different story altogether, okay? This is not going to end up like a situation where they abandon him or they assassinate him and make him into a martyr. I think we're far from that. And those 24 billion reasons determine that we're certainly far from that. And that's just from the United States, understand. And now we're ramping up our military-industrial production because a world war is here. This is it. This is World War III. People are waiting for the flash bang, but it's really, at this point in time, if you go back in the history books and you say, when did World War III start? Especially if it culminates into a full-blown nuclear exchange. They're not going to say it started that minute. They're not going to say it started the moment that they pushed the button. No, they're going to go back. They're going to go back. Whatever is remembered, whatever is still, whatever libraries still exist or records are available at that point in time, they're going to look for what precipitated it all. Okay? And they're going to look for the run-up, because that's the only way you can really understand a modern world war. It's the run-up. It's the build-up. Anyways. So we got some action going on in the Black Sea right now. This guy has been circulating here all day. And typically when you have this surveillance aircraft, they took a break for a while. And now this one has been there for the last 24 hours or so. And usually when you have this activity there, you're not going to get an immediate attack on a bridge or piece of critical infrastructure, commercial vessel, military installations within Crimea, but something is going to happen soon. So you can bet that they're going to do something, and then the Russians are going to do something back, and we're going to continue to see the conflict intensify. Now, what's happening in Ukraine is that there's a bit of a retreat on the part of the Ukrainians. They are pulling out a lot of the civilian population around the Kupiansk region. And you can see the parts in yellow here, that's where the Russians have reclaimed territory. So clearly they're concerned that the Russians are going to start making advancements towards the massive city of Kharkov, which they were fighting for in the early stages of the war. And they were just on the outskirts of Kharkov. In fact, they had a lot of territory running all the way up here, but they pulled back and they put their defenses closer. As you can see, these are all their defenses, these triangles. And so they pulled back, they fortified their defensive lines. Now they're going to push forward. And if you were one of the people that believed, well, you know, it's looking like the risk of nuclear war is de-escalated because now the Russians are getting the upper hand, what I just told you about the artillery shells says otherwise. What I just told you about the $24 billion in aid says otherwise. We know that this is a war of attrition now, and if the rumors are true that the Russians are losing 4 artillery pieces for every 1 artillery piece of the Ukrainians, if that is true, then this is a war of attrition that Russia may lose. They may in fact lose if we step up our industrial military game, which is of course why they're reaching out to the North Koreans, who are obviously providing weapons, which is why they're getting weapons from the Chinese, undoubtedly, why they're getting weapons from the Iranians. So this is a global war of attrition. And you better just hope that the Russians aren't viewing it as an existential threat just yet. Now, you might see the launch of a moon rocket, a space mission today by the Russians, sending a mission to the moon, to the polar regions of the moon, something that has never been done before. And that may be taken as, oh, Russia has this excess amount of resources. Obviously, they're sending people to the moon. Clearly, they're not up against the ropes just yet. But oftentimes, you'll do something like that almost just to, you know, take away. And they've done many things like this throughout war. You'll have military parades while, you know, the guys are banging on the doorstep. I think they did that in World War II. It was Stalin who had a military parade while the Nazis had, they were very close to taking over Moscow. And, you know, so you can't take that as, oh, yeah, the Russians got all this extra resources to burn. I don't think so. I think the situation is much, much worse. And it could very quickly spiral out of control. Very, very quickly. Now, according to one member of the Russian Duma, the Deputy Foreign Minister, Mikhail Galuzin, told TASS, that's the major Russian news network, state-sponsored news network, that NATO is creating a scenario for the use of nuclear weapons against Russia. So the Russians are already starting to make nuclear accusations towards the Americans. Now, for the pro-Russian crowd who believes that the US will be the ones to drop the nuke first, this is no surprise. But for the rest of you who are maybe just getting into this discourse, there is definitely a subset of people within the community who believe that, in fact, the United States is the one who are plotting a first strike against the Russians. Anyways, NATO practices so-called joint nuclear missions, which means that members of the alliance that do not have nuclear weapons are involved in military planning for their use. and that their experts are trained to handle American nuclear ammunition, like Poland. Moreover, these plans are directed at Russia, he specified. Galuzin reminded that since the Cold War, the USA has kept its nuclear weapons on the territory of non-nuclear member states, like Turkey, without any real threats, as well as the fact that Russian side has repeatedly emphasized that this has a negative impact on the situation in the field of international and European security. There is, of course, nuclear weapons in Belarus, where the Poles are amassing force along the border. That's how it starts. 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. NATO is assembling a force of 360,000 troops on Russia's western flank. Do you think they're getting nervous? A country who's been invaded countless times throughout history, a country who prides its strategic forces, whether it's mobile ICBM platforms, it's Skyfall, nuclear-powered nuclear planes, which are still, I think they're still in the prototype phase. But the Russians want to make a plane that just flies around non-stop, which is also going to be a missile or have the ability to launch missiles. It's going to be nuclear-powered. They also want to create Poseidon nuclear torpedoes with 100 megaton yield, which would wipe the eastern seaboard off the map. And of course, they also have the Sarmat, which can level Britain with one weapon. So this is real. It's getting realer and realer by the day. And because people are so TikTok brain nowadays, if it doesn't happen right away, then it's never going to happen, right? People are very fickle like that. On the natural front, this is Hawaii. This is crazy. Absolutely crazy that a place like that could go up in flames so quick. Some people are already circulating conspiracy theories about sabotage by the Russians and this and that, but you know, it's just you get the perfect set of conditions. In order for something like this to happen, you need the conditions, and that's one thing that everybody always underestimates. You always have to have the conditions for anything in terms of the scope and scale of this in order for it to ensue. Let's go around the map and see what else we got to talk about today. We know the Russians are going to be mobilizing soon. They're going to have no choice. Most people don't realize, but there's massive fires burning in Siberia as well because there is record temperatures there. And we're about to see some massive temperatures in the coming week ahead, especially on the West Coast. So Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, southern British Columbia is going to see a massive heat wave, as well as Europe next week. And the heat is going to go all the way down to the south. So we're going to have a lot of stress on the grid next week. And as you can see up here in Siberia, a lot of this heat, where these fires are raging up here in Siberia, a lot of the warming has been happening in Siberia. And that's where a lot of the, what do they call it? The peat or the permafrost. The permafrost melts, okay? And that's not good either. We got Zelensky claiming that we are going to be starting to target Russian commercial vessels in the Black Sea. So that's probably why you got the US surveillance planes there. And of course, because this surveillance plane is there, you know, it's very likely, oh, it looks like it went off. It turned its transponder off now. It's been flying all day and now it turned its transponder off finally. Because you're seeing that, it's quite possible, who knows, the Russians may have shot it down as I'm sitting here. But that means that the likelihood of an engagement between the Americans and the Russians in the Black Sea is increasing as well. So it's just not good. This is another shot of that massive fire. 2,000 square meters, 20,000 square feet. Very big fire. And all of these fires, you know, they all share the same sort of characteristic. They're all very notable. They're all very distinct. You can see them from a distance. That's why the Ukrainians target various places that they know are going to make a big bang and to get the most bang for their buck, so to speak. Apparently, at some of the bridges across the Crimean Peninsula, they're starting to erect pontoon bridges in anticipation. So that's what this is here, in anticipation that the Ukrainians, this is the Kronodar Bridge, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they're starting to erect backup pontoon bridges, and that means that they're actually concerned about, you know, the infrastructure in Crimea being damaged to the extent that is going to compromise the war effort. Just another escalation, guys. Something to look at. And yeah, ECOWAS is going to begin operation in Niger. So, you know, I mean, Niger's junta told a top U.S. diplomat that they were going to kill deposed president if regional countries attempted any military intervention. But they're going to do it anyway. So it's like, who's going to call whose bluff? Mali nor Burkina Faso has yet to commit troops just yet, but they claim that they will support them if that happens. This is going to be the range of those missiles in that the Taurus missiles that Ukraine is going to be getting from the German government. The German government plans to give long-range Taurus missiles to Ukraine. They're soon going to decide whenever they float the idea of something. Remember, that's just to put it out there in the minds of the public. And of course, this will be the range from the most northeastern part of Ukraine. They will be able to attack Moscow. Now, the German government is saying that they're trying to figure out ways that they can restrict Ukraine's ability to use these deep within Russia, because they don't want to provoke any major response or attacks from the Russians into NATO countries, because they know that will happen. So maybe they'll find a way to geofence these, or I don't even know if that's possible. I'm sure the Ukrainians, with their level of technical ingenuity and know-how, will be able to jailbreak that if they do decide to put those restrictions on. Will they do it is the question, of course. It will mean that their support will likely weaken, but at this stage in the game, it's all just a game. NATO has a timeline for all the weapons that they're going to release in such a way to try to minimize the risk of Russia going nuclear. I really don't understand what our leaders think the outcome is going to be that would be favorable to the West. I mean, do they think that Russia is going to abandon the annexed territories? Do they truly think that they're going to abandon Crimea? Do they truly think that the Putin government is going to be overthrown, or that a destabilized Russia is going to be in NATO's benefit? I don't think so. I think they have pretty much decided that, you know, for all we know, the plan is to go to nuclear war with Russia. I mean, that could very well be the plan. And everybody, we've been sold this myth about how, oh, it's mutually assured destruction. There's some people who think they can win a nuclear war. I'm not going to go into this. Once again, we've interviewed countless amounts of people, but there are some people on both sides that think a nuclear war is winnable. And it comes down a lot to spying, espionage, sleeper cells, and minimizing the damage. I mean, you know, if you talk to some people in the US government, I would not put it past some psychopaths out there to say, you know what, if we lose 20 million, 30 million people, but we win, maybe it's worth it, because then we get to go to Russia and we get to take all their stuff. We get to break it up, right? And you wipe Moscow out. And I know this is crazy thinking, but there might be people who are looking at it that way. And even from the Russian perspective, the Russians have always postured in such a way that they are positioning their strategic forces in order for a first strike, in order to win a nuclear war. And because they don't have the manpower and the conventional power of the West, some people would disagree with that. That's pretty much what they're left to, okay? So this $24 billion in aid that Biden is about to get, I mean, that's all the proof you need that all those people were saying, oh yeah, no more support for Ukraine. That's all bullshit, okay? There's a lot of support for Ukraine. There's all sorts of nuclear bombers, nuclear doomsday planes, if you will, have been spotted across social media. There's a picture of one up in the air here. And yeah, they're just everywhere. You know, so just something to be mindful of is that, you know, they have a plan. Hopefully you do too. This one's pretty intense. This is a chart that shows the amount of wildfire activity in Canada this year. And this is just absolutely staggering. I mean, this is just insane how, you know, people can still say that nothing weird is going on. This is the average. This is the record amount of fire burned. This is where we are right now, okay? And we're what, 60% through the season? And BC is about to get lit up because it's going to get warm there again in the coming days ahead, and Canada is still in a drought. We had a good downpour today. Unfortunately, that's not going to be enough to alleviate a lot of the dry conditions. So all I can say, my friends, is keep on keeping on, keep on getting ready, because it would appear that the war is spreading just as we predicted. It's happening in slow motion, and you should thank whatever you believe in for that, because that's more time for you to prepare for what's coming. If you want to get ready, go to CanadianPreparedness.com. You can use coupon code Canadian Prepper for 10% off. All the gear, not that the gear is necessarily in and of itself going to save you. In fact, we're working on a new series now, which looks at who's going to survive. I think you guys are going to like this. We're going to be talking about people, famous people who you might not think were preppers, but in fact are preppers. And we're going to be ranking them on their survivability. And we're going to be comparing those with just everyday people like you and me. And you will be surprised what we've been discovering is based on our analysis. It doesn't matter how much money you got. Yeah, that's going to give you a bit of a head start. But it comes down to adaptability. It comes down to your temperament. It comes down to courage, motivation, your will to survive. It comes down to a lot of things that you don't need to carry. You just have to have up here, okay? So stay tuned for that, my friends, and take care. And please, if you enjoy this video, if you found something, I think enjoy is not the right word at this point, but if you got something of value out of this video, like, comment, subscribe, share. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.